Hi everyone, welcome to the Homeroom live stream. Today we're actually just going to have an Ask Me Anything. So any questions you have for me about anything, I encourage you to put below, whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, put this on the message boards below, and we have team members who will look at it and surface questions about anything. So please start doing that. And now that I've given you a head start on asking questions, I will give my standard announcements. We are not for profit. The only reason why Khan Academy can even exist is because of philanthropic donations from folks like yourself. So if you're in a position to do so, please think about donating to Khan Academy. I do want to give a special shout out to several corporations that stepped up, especially as they saw that we were already running at a deficit pre-COVID, and then with COVID, our server costs went up. We were trying to accelerate a whole series of programs. So special thanks to Bank of America, Google.org, AT&T, Fastly, and Novartis. And that help has been a big deal, but we are still running at a deficit. And so any support, whether you're a corporation or you're just an individual, at any amount, makes a huge difference and allows us to reach a lot more folks. Another series of announcements, I'll introduce my colleague Dan, that some of y'all have seen before on the live stream. Dan has some announcements as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Al. So we have a couple of announcements and reminders for everyone for this week. So today we just list. We recognize that summer is different from the regular school year. So we created a playlist of recommended activities covering math, language arts, and creativity. And in the math section, I just want to call out two things. First, Camp Con, as well as Get Ready for Grade Level courses. So as a reminder, that we launched the Get Ready for Grade Level courses this week, and each of those math courses will contain the most important prerequisite skills for that particular grade. And we know you have a limited amount of time, so the intent is really to provide learners with the most efficient way to engage with their upcoming grade level work. And wrapping the Get Ready for Grade Level courses is Camp Con. So Camp Con launched this Monday. As a reminder, it's our virtual summer camp that kicked off, and it will run through the end of August. Camp Con helps students prepare for math in the fall with those Get Ready for Grade Level courses. And Camp Con was designed to build habits and mindsets for learning, and we were really intentional about making it fun for the summer. And so if you want to learn more, there's a parent webinar all about Camp Con tomorrow at 4 o'clock to 4:30 PST, 7 o'clock Eastern time. So please join us if you want to learn more. So those are the announcements for this week. Thanks, Al.
Great, thanks, Dan. And I'll just doubly underline some of what Dan just mentioned. Obviously, we had Lindsay on Monday talking about the Get Ready for Grade Level courses. We're really excited about this because in any summer, a lot of students need, have gaps that they need to fill in to be ready. And this is going to be a summer, an extended summer, where many more students are going to need that help. And so whether you're a student, a parent, or a teacher, this is a great way for students to get ready for grade level work and make sure they have no Swiss cheese gaps going into it. And then Camp Con, as Dan just mentioned, is a great way of making it even more interactive and fun and having a whole layer of programs and fun on top of the Get Ready for Grade Level courses. So definitely check those things out. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Looks like questions have already come in. Let's see, from YouTube, Aya A says, hi, Sal. Do you know how schools expect to open with COVID-19? If they do, how will they do it safely? And if they don't, how can they make sure we're learning? Thank you. Well, Aya A, I think what you're referring to is I think we talk to a lot of district superintendents and principals and teachers, and I think everyone is really struggling with it because I think even 2 weeks ago, before COVID-19 started to pick up again, and it does look like it's picking up again in much of the US, at least, people were thinking that, all right, we're going to have to do some type of socially distanced, shift-based model for back to school where half the kids come on, say, Monday and Wednesday, and the other half come on Tuesday and Thursday, or maybe the high school students don't come to school and do everything virtually, and then they use that real estate for the middle and elementary school so that people can become more socially distanced, also do shift-based with the teacher. So it's this really complex thing that people were thinking about. And even before the pickup in COVID, people were also expecting a potential pickup in COVID. So you might have to virtualize really fast or go to hybrid learning. Or even if you are able to show up, there might be a subset of kids whose families don't feel comfortable sending them to school. So you're going to have some virtual model. What I'm hearing right now, and this is a few days old, it might change based on the epidemiological statistics of how far COVID has spread, is people are definitely focused on the younger students because I think that's where, frankly, the childcare issue is super difficult for a lot of families. I think in areas where they can, people are thinking very seriously about outdoors. We had Rachel Skiffer on yesterday from Conlab School, and I and her have been talking a lot about how can we leverage, cordon off some of the parking lots and essentially, have some hot spots and leverage that for outdoor play or even getting work done for at least part of the day to make it a little bit more safer and to get some social distancing. But the simple answer is I think people are still struggling with what can you do even from a physical spacing epidemiological point of view. And then once you get that right, given how uncertain it is, the curricular point of view is even more uncertain. This is where Khan Academy, we are trying our best to help support schools, teachers, parents, and students. As Dan's announcements about the Get Ready for Grade Level course, that's part of it to make sure that people are, if they can use this over the summer, that's great. They'll be more ready for back to school. But even if they don't use this over the summer, either the first couple of weeks of back to school could be focused on that Get Ready for Grade Level, because a lot of kids have been disengaged for many months now. Or as you go through the grade level work, you can in parallel do the Get Ready for Grade Level. We're also working on learning plans. Some of you all know several months ago, we had learning plans for learning, especially math, through the end of the school year in the summer. Now we want to create learning plans for starting back to school through the school year. So expect to see those in the next few weeks. And we are actually working on a study of what were the best practices of schools during or districts during school closures. And given the best practices before, what are kind of playbooks for districts and schools to think about hybrid learning, where you're doing some leveraging Khan Academy, where kids are learning at their own time and pace, but you're also leveraging synchronous sessions, whether it's socially distanced inside of the classroom or synchronous sessions on video conferencing of somehow, and how can you do that well? What are the best practices? So we're going to try our best to support teachers and districts in this situation, but the simple answer is I think very few people really know how this is going to evolve, and it's a little scary because we're only about 8 weeks away, and obviously if COVID keeps picking up, we might be back into a lockdown scenario in a couple of weeks that isn't that different than what we saw in March and April and May. So we're trying to do the most on our side to help out, but it's going to be tough and uncertain for a lot of folks. So let's see, from YouTube, Osama Al-Saudi says, Sal, do you have any plans on improving your site and making new versions of videos with better quality and making new techniques for teaching, or making online paid courses, for example, using Zoom? Good question. So simple answers are yes, we're constantly trying to think about how to improve the site. And Khan Academy, we're over 200 folks. And I know some of you want to say 200 folks, that's a lot. We can do a lot with that. But I remind folks, we're the budget of a large high school, and we have 107 million registered users, and we have, 80, 90 million minutes of learning per day during the school year, during weekdays. So we're trying to do a lot. We cover, we have Khan Academy Kids at the pre-K level, which covers math, reading, writing, social emotional learning, and then math, obviously, we keep going all the way to early college. Then, we have the sciences at the high school and early college level. We're adding English and language arts. We have test prep. So there's a lot of dimensions that we're working on. But we have a steady pipeline of improvement. Some of them aren't as obvious. We're doing a major infrastructure rehaul right now, which won't change your user experience other than it will hopefully make the site faster for you and more performant and more reliable for you. And that also it'll make it easier for us to develop new features. Now on the feature side, we're constantly thinking about how do we change the user experience so that it is more engaging, so that it's more effective. And so you ask a lot about video. So I have a list of videos that I'm either redoing or new videos to cover certain topics where it seems like we still have gaps. We have a whole content team that's constantly adding and revising exercises. And we have a large engineering and product team, designers, product managers, to think about both the back end, how do we make the infrastructure more scalable as we're trying to serve so many people, and the front end, which in kind of tech speak is the user experience side of things. How do we make it more engaging? And so you see things like this Get Ready for Grade Level courses, that's more on the content side. We're doing these learning plans, that's kind of on the content school partnership side of things. And for this back to school, we're going to have things, we're going to bring back certain reports that teachers have been asking or improve those reports. And then I hope a few months after that, you'll start seeing some navigational improvements on the site. So there's a lot that we're trying to juggle right now. And I just kind of glazed over the tip of the iceberg of what's going on. So This is, so Facebook, Carol Smith Capper says, Sal, do you have any recommendation for older students who are supposed to be spending the summer doing internships so they have all been canceled? Uh, I do have advice, and I don't know how good it is, so take it or leave it, so to speak. But I've been telling this to any young person who's in that situation. I think there's a ton of opportunity right now to do really interesting things that can help a lot of folks. There could be simple things of supporting people who live alone, especially elderly people might be feeling very isolated right now in times of COVID, and helping them get tech access, or through tech access, making sure that they have someone to talk to, have someone to help them out with the groceries, and it would be for you to figure out how to do that in kind of a safe, socially distanced way. I think there's a lot of potentially educators, teachers who could help using support, especially as they're trying to transition to this hybrid model and teach kids over Zoom or whatever else. Maybe you could be a teaching assistant for them of some sort. We have this project, schoolhouse.world, that this is not a Khan Academy project. It's more of a Sal project. Maybe one day it'll become part of a Khan Academy project. But it is this notion that on Khan Academy, you can learn at your own time and pace, get practice feedback, game mechanics. Teachers can monitor it. There's videos and articles to help unstick you and hints on each of the exercises. But a complete learning experience would also involve some form of synchronous live human interaction, where you can ask questions, not only just from a teacher or tutor, but maybe also from peers. And so this notion about schoolhouse.world, which is Mariah Olson is a volunteer who's been driving this, and one of my buddies from college, his name's Shashir Marotra, runs a company called Coda.io. They've essentially volunteered their time to build the schoolhouse.world so that it can match tutors and students who need help, so that you can volunteer to be a tutor. But interestingly, right now we have it's a social engineering experiment that we're doing right now. We have more tutors and less demand. So if anyone has questions, and especially high school math, go to schoolhouse.world right now. There's a little registration form, and then we let people in. So we're at this unusual situation right now where there's a lot of amazing people who are hungry to tutor people for free as volunteers, and we're looking for more students who need that tutoring. So definitely go to schoolhouse.world, whether you want to be a tutor or whether you want to learn something. I could imagine, there's a bunch of other, it might not even be related to COVID right now, but this is a great time on Zoom to start a podcast or an interview series on a topic that you find interesting. And a lot of folks have more time on their hands right now because they're at home and they're not traveling and all of that. So you'd be surprised. You could reach out to folks and have interesting conversations with them. I think it's interesting just as a family project. Get on Zoom with family members all over the country or the world and record your family history. That's not going to be the type of internship that's going to pay you, but I actually think it's pretty cool just to have. If you think about if your house is burning down, God forbid, the thing that you're going to try to leave the house with are your pictures and all your family memories. And one thing that I've been trying to do is videotape family members, especially older family members, and ask them about their life history, ask them about their childhood, ask them about their journeys in life, their struggles. Get them on video. You can record Zoom and Google Hangouts and all that. So I think that could also be another interesting project. But there's tons of opportunity, I think, to focus on whatever topic is interesting to you. So let's see. Adnan Kanchwala says, "Sir, you make all the subjects very interesting." Thanks, Adnan. I appreciate that. How did you find your love for a particular subject? Well, if your question is how do I find a love for all subjects, is because I do generally believe all subjects are interesting. I've said this multiple times on the live stream that sometimes students feel like, oh, I got to learn this subject. I guess I'll do it. What's on the test? But you have to realize that knowledge that you get to learn. Well, first of all, it's a luxury. If you think about like human history, it's a luxury to be able to dedicate years of your life for the pursuit of learning. Most of human history, most human beings did not have that luxury. And that the learning that we now have access to, we have access to the total of human knowledge, or most of it, up until this point. And, many very smart folks would have done anything to have access to the knowledge that you now have access to. Now, I do think sometimes textbooks and some courses don't do the best job of reminding folks how exciting this knowledge is. And hopefully Khan Academy At least sometimes if I'm making the video, you hear it even in my voice that I'm excited about it. There's something interesting here. But I would remind yourself about that in particular. If your question is how did I find the path in life? Like, how did I decide what to focus on, given that I somehow found every subject interesting? I mean, I used to say in college, if there was something called a PhD in everything, I would have tried to get that PhD because I really enjoyed learning about a lot of varied things and try to draw connections between them. But for me, it was a combination of I had a lot of debt. My family was not very wealthy. So when I was 21 years old, I was like, okay, let me do something that I find really interesting, that I think I've developed some really good skills at, that can also help pay off debt, even help support my family. And so this was I graduated in 1998 from college and from a master's program, and computer science. So it was a great time, and frankly it's even a better time now in that field. But as I went into that path, I actually just gave a few graduation addresses. And what I've told everyone is when you're young, you often say, oh, do I pick this major or that major? Do I pick that job or that job? And, ask a lot of people, make the best informed decision you can. But there's no such thing as the perfect decision there. There's no such thing as the perfect path. What matters more is the energy and the attitude that you bring to that path. So whatever it is. So my first job, I was a product manager at Oracle, which is a big kind of database enterprise software company. And, my boss told me, look, Sal, it's easy to sometimes get cynical at a big company. You feel like you're kind of a small cog in a big machine. But he's like, just make every day better than the last. How are you making yourself better? How are you making the people around you better? Constantly be asking questions, constantly looking around for opportunities for you to make a difference, whether it's at work or at home. And then my boss, after business school, I worked at a hedge fund. So you can tell I've done my share of career changes. He reminded me that it's super important as an investor to have time to pursue your passions and develop interests, because it'll allow you to see the world in new ways that other people in participating in, say, the stock market do not. And so you might be able to see an interesting investment before others. And it also is just a way to recharge and make sure that you're not making a bunch of bad decisions, but more likely making a few good decisions. So that's my best advice. Pick a path, ask a lot of questions, and you don't have to be embarrassed about even asking about very practical things about how much money do you make, what are the work hours, what are the benefits, but also is this going to be a job that I can enjoy doing, that I'm not going to be miserable doing. And then once you find that path, make sure you have space for your passions, and then you have this positive attitude towards both the job and what you're able to do outside of your work. And the last thing I would say is don't define yourself entirely by your work. I think in our society we kind of define who we are as people by our work, and then that creates this kind of weird stress and almost it creates an unsatisfaction with work, because you're looking for almost too much meaning out of your work, where you could get a lot of meaning in other things in life. Let's see. So good question though. So Rylan Rate says, I've used Khan Academy for 5 years, and I have to say thank you. Thank you, Rylan, for thanking us. What is going to be your next update? What course or part of the website are you most proud of? Thank you so much. Well, we've talked about some of the updates, things like the Get Ready for Grade level courses. Expect to see things like Learning Plan soon. We're constantly iterating and tweaking all of the content across the site. There's going to be some teacher tools that are going to get updated in the next few, actually in time for back to school. We have some plans that are probably about 6 months away. Don't hold me to it, because there's a lot going on, where we want to improve the navigation around course mastery and things like that. Those are the big ones. I mean, there's definitely more subject areas that we want to improve on. So yeah, there's a lot. Let's see. From YouTube, Suhana Inaya says, I forget maths I've practiced before very easily, and it's hard to remember again in practice. So what should I do to never forget them? Well, Suhana, my best advice, and this is actually backed up by research, there's this notion of spaced repetition, which Khan Academy tries to do, which is when you learn something, there's kind of a forgetting curve that, there's over time, your likelihood of being able to know it diminishes over time. But if after some degradation, you go and review that thing again, the probability that it gets back to where it was before. And now this time, because of that spaced repetition, your degradation curve is slower. And so then after, say, twice as long, you review it again, then your degradation curve will be even slower. So my best advice to you would be, one, keep if you can create a consistent practice, say even 15, 20 minutes a day, say 3, 4, 5 days a week on Khan Academy, if you can make that a habit, just like brushing your teeth or making your bed, which I also highly recommend, then I think it's much less likely that these skills will atrophy and that you will forget, so to speak. And we have things like mastery challenges that make you review things that do that spaced repetition. And we have things like course challenges and unit tests. The other thing I would say is when you're learning, especially math, sometimes there's this tendency to memorize formulas and just say, okay, what steps do I need to do to get the right answer? That might work in the short term sometimes, and that'll work less and less as you get into more and more advanced math. What's far more helpful is to think about, why does it work? Why does it make sense? That algebraic step, it's not some magic incantation. Why does it make sense that you have to add the same thing to both sides of an equation? Well, if two things were equal before, if you do something to only one side of it, if you change the value of only one side, they can't be equal anymore. So you have to change the value in the same way to both sides. So always connect these dots. And what you'll find is all of math is connected. And if you do that, especially with more of the foundational skills, you're going to find that the more advanced skills almost become intuitive. You're going to be like, well, why does someone even have to tell me this? This is obvious. So I highly recommend do the spaced repetition and really sit and think and ponder why something in math makes sense and how it connects to other things you know. And what I just said actually isn't just math. This applies, frankly, to almost any field you're trying to study. So let's see. Rudranil Mondal from Facebook says, how do you deal with social media negativity? It's a good question. And, I've said on this forum before that I do things like meditation and how it's kind of like a Rain-X for the mind, for your emotions. Rain-X, if you don't know, it's this thing that you can kind of wipe onto your windshield, and that when it rains, the water just kind of beads up and washes off. You almost don't even need a windshield wiper if you put that chemical. I don't know if the chemical's good for you or not, but it does wonders for beating up water. But I've always said things like meditation are kind of like Rain-X for your mind, because obviously if someone says something to you that you disagree with, or says you're like this, or is making a generalization about you, or saying something negative, we all have an ego of different sizes that immediately wants to react to that immediately says, I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they think that about me. Don't they know that I'm this, that, or I'm a good person? We all have these internal voices, which is really our ego. And when you meditate, you realize you are not your ego. You are not that little voice that's always trying to defend itself. And then you can kind of let these things go a little bit more. It identifies your awareness less with your persona. You're like, you know what? They're criticizing this thing that they perceive called Sal or whatever, but I'm not that. And really, should I get that worked up about it? One day the sun will absorb the earth and the universe will experience kind of a heat death. Is this really that big of a deal? With that said, it does hit you every now and then. And I'm not, we're lucky at Khan Academy because we are, I believe, doing kind of a positive social thing, that most of the feedback we get is positive. But we do get critiques and criticisms, and every now and then I get emails at one of my email addresses, at the SCon email, which I do look at, which are kind of angry sometimes. I suspect maybe a student feels a little frustrated with the mastery mechanics or something, and they'll sometimes even use expletives, which I read those things, and it doesn't feel great. But I just remind myself that it's not really going at you directly. It's going at someone's conception of what they think is some type of an organization. And I think it's much easier for people to be a little bit mean to what they think is an abstract organization than to another human being. But yeah, so bottom line, meditate. Try not to take that seriously. Recognize that what folks say about you on social media or anywhere else really isn't defining of who you are. Let's see. So Michelle Marie Musui says from Facebook, any advice on how to help kids with math anxiety? So I'm not a psychologist, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But I saw this even in the early days when I was tutoring my cousins. I think there's something very powerful about building a habit, and then as you build a habit and say work on Khan Academy, and you start building some confidence, because especially over the summer, if a student's able to work on Khan Academy even 20 minutes a day, there's not the stresses of, oh, I have to get this homework done by tomorrow, or how am I going to perform on the exam, or I want to make sure that I get an A or a B in the class. None of those anxieties are there. So it's really, you're just doing it the way that you might, learn a musical instrument or practice a sport. And so that, I think, in of itself starts to reduce the anxieties. And then as the students practice in a kind of a deliberate habit forming way, they will gain more confidence. And I recommend using the Get Ready for Grade Level courses, or even start at kids, even if they're a later elementary school or middle school student, start them at early learning or start them in their arithmetic course, so they can review some of those basics and build that confidence, and then fill in all their Swiss cheese gaps, which is another source of lack of confidence, so that when they get to their grade level or beyond, they feel a lot more confident. The other thing is, I think it's reminding students, and just a little bit of that meditation conversation I just had, and actually even a minute or two of meditation, which is really just sitting silently and letting your thoughts get as still as possible, I think is really powerful for any type of anxiety. I've said it on this forum before. I've never really enjoyed planes. I get kind of claustrophobic on planes. It's like a real thing for me. And I just remind myself, look, Sal, that anxiety circuit in your brain that's starting to cycle, that's not you. And once you can kind of just observe that, it starts to slow down. And you're like, hey, I'm not this thing that's anxious about this plane. And it is what it is. The die has been cast. It serves no one for me to be miserable about this. And I think even with young kids, when you talk about that, and when you talk about things like growth mindset, that look, it's not about whether you get it right or get it wrong. It's all about the effort that you put into it. It's not about whether you're quote smart or not smart. I'd argue there's not, that's not the thing. It's about how much are you willing to persevere and have resiliency. And when you get something wrong, learn from those mistakes. And that's actually when your brain grows the most. Let's see. Are there other? Oh, there's a lot of good questions here. So Susana Garcia Dominguez, one of our regulars on the live stream. Good to see you, Susana. Hopefully one day we'll meet in person. I feel like I know you since you asked so many good questions. What are some of your favorite movies? And I think I've answered that in a previous Ask Me Anything. I will say, we had Francis Ford Coppola on about 2 weeks ago, and I'm not usually a fan of bloody movies and violent movies. I'm pretty, I guess you could say, soft that way. I'm usually a fan of like Pixar and things like that. But The Godfather is one of the top movies of all time, and so that's why it was pretty cool to have Francis on. I'd say Gandhi is definitely one of my favorite. When I was in college, I used to organize an annual viewing of Gandhi, so that's also one of my top favorite movies. I will say Star Wars, Episode 4, the original one, and the newer Star Wars, it feels like it's a little bit of a business now, where they keep kind of going through the same plot lines, and so it's kind of, I don't know, the plot line seems to be over and over, someone who needs to discover their potential and struggle with the dark force while the Empire is building some device that can kill planets. I think they're reusing that plot a little bit too much. So the new Star Wars, in some ways, kind of, I don't know, making the original Star Wars feel derivative, even though it's the other way around. But Star Wars definitely is one of my all-time favorite movies. Let's see, other favorite movies. I could probably think of others, but those are the three that are coming. Well, The Matrix. The Matrix is. I remember when The Matrix came out. I believe it was the summer of 1998. I had just graduated from college, and everyone was excited about the new Star Wars movies that were going to come out, the prequels that were going to come out at the end of that summer. And myself and a couple of friends, we were just bored one Friday, and we're like, well, there's this movie with Matrix. It's got Keanu Reeves, maybe it's like Speed or something like that. And we went with, fairly low expectations, but we were blown away. So I'd say The Matrix is a pretty good movie. And actually, The Matrix is in a strange way. It's really connected to these notions of meditation and what is reality anyway, and should we get too caught up, or to some degree, by definition, your mind has constructed this, the reality. Now we all believe that there's a true reality outside of our mind that's informing our mind as it constructs that reality. But The Matrix definitely plays around with those ideas, I think, in a pretty effective way. So let's see. Other questions. So Rubik's Nerd from YouTube says, can you please explain advanced quadratics? This is probably not the right place to do it, but we do have a lot of content on advanced quadratics on Khan Academy. I would go to Algebra 2 and look at the factoring quadratics or solving quadratics or or solving quadratic equations on our Algebra 2 content, and maybe some of our pre-calculus content as well if you're looking at advanced quadratics. So that's the best. We probably have 20 or 30 videos and exercises just on the topic of quadratics. So let's see, we're almost out of time, but I really enjoy doing this. Let's see, other questions. So actually, this is an interesting one from Facebook. Miran Ararat says, "Hey Sal, what is your opinion about IQ, intelligence quotient?" I am skeptical of it. I think you can have a test with logic puzzles, and it will measure capability in that dimension. It will measure your capability at that moment in doing logic puzzles. But the problem I have with intelligent IQ tests is that they'll use that, how you happen to perform on those logic puzzles or whatever they're making you do, at that moment, and they'll make some generalizations on your innate ability or how that might carry over to all walks of life. And I think that's just, you're overgeneralizing at that point. For example, I think you could take almost anyone, and if you gave them practice solving the types of logic puzzles that you see on IQ tests, their IQ will increase, which tells you that the IQ is not, their measured IQ would increase according to those tests. And I know plenty of people who, in that dimension of IQ could do very well or might not do so well, but in other dimensions that I think any of us would consider a sign of intelligence or a sign of critical thinking capability are amazing. I know some people who are amazing, they're amazingly funny or observant or, amazing public speakers or storytellers, which I would say for me is almost the purest. If someone is good at those things, that's kind of a raw form of intelligence. But because of background or exposure or just interest, have never kind of gotten into the whole logic puzzles, which tend to show up in IQ tests. So yeah, they're interesting. I've taken them every now and then. They're fun. I've been one of those people who's been lucky to be good at those things. So when I was young, I remember I think it was second grade. I remember some kind of a psychiatrist sitting with me for like 3 hours, giving me a bunch of IQ tests, and then that helped me kind of get into the school gave me more attention, which was amazing. I was lucky, but I'm suspicious of that test because there's other kids that probably had at least as much potential that probably didn't, that wasn't their thing. So let's see, maybe we're out of time, but this is, maybe, are there any other last questions that maybe to finish off in? I'm learning. Actually, this is an interesting question from YouTube. Adeline Aglemio says, "Hello, Sal. Right now, I'm learning that all the Ivy League schools aren't requiring the SAT. What then can you enter with?" So Adeline, good question. So first of all, if they're making the SAT optional or the SAT and the ACT optional, it doesn't mean that they're not going to consider the SAT. I think the reason why they're doing that, especially this year, is because it's with COVID, access to taking some tests might be a little bit more difficult. But University of Chicago, and we had Jim Nondorf on this Homeroom a couple of months ago, they famously went testing optional, but still 90% of the students applying submit some form of SAT or ACT scores. So the universities for sure are going to still consider it, and they do view it as something. Once again, they don't view your SAT score as defining of who you are, but they view that in conjunction with your grades, your extracurriculars, your essays, your recommendations as something that altogether can help predict your college readiness and your long-term potential. So if you're in a position to take something like the SAT, highly recommend to do it. Now, another thing that I was talking to Jim Nondorf about, this was kind of off camera, is he said, look, I would be interested in if kids can show that they've mastered courses on Khan Academy, because not only does that show that they know the material, but it also shows that they had the agency and they had the drive on their own to learn the material. And so I highly recommend, if you are thinking about going to selective universities, get mastery at your own time and pace. Summer is a great time to do it, especially for some of you who had your internships canceled. And use that time to master as many of the advanced courses as you can on Khan Academy: calculus, statistics, physics, chemistry, biology, economics, American history, civics. These are all things that we have at a senior or even early college level. And if you can get 90% mastery on Khan Academy or 100% mastery, take a screenshot and send it in with your college applications. I think the colleges will take that seriously, and also tell them why you did that, because you have drive, you have initiative. That's all the colleges are really looking for. They're looking for good people who are interesting, who want to help the world, who have the drive and the intellectual capability and the discipline to fulfill those ambitions at some point in their life, and also contribute to a diverse kind of engaging community on campus. So that's my best advice there. So we're all out of time. This is super fun. We'll do this again. And thanks everyone for joining.